911, what's your emergency?
She fell! Oh my god, she fell off the balcony! There's a chimpanzee up there!
Ma'am, did you say a chimpanzee? Is the animal loose?
Yes. It's just standing there, watching her. Please, send someone.
She was known for her bond with the wild, but on a humid Florida afternoon, Mia Reyes plummeted 5 stories to her death with only her pet chimpanzee. This is the horrifying story of trust, blindness, and a tragic fall, both literal and symbolic. If this story shocks you already, make sure to subscribe, like, and tell us in the comments, could this tragedy have been prevented? Mia Reyes was, to many of her online followers, a beacon of gentle eccentricity, a woman in her late 30s who had traded in a traditional life for something far more captivating. A life lived alongside a chimpanzee named Toto. Nestled in her sleek high-rise overlooking Fort Lauderdale's sun-drenched shoreline, Mia curated a persona that blurred the line between influencer and caretaker, between spectacle and surrogate motherhood. Her social media pages overflowed with videos of Toto in costumes, high-fiving hotel staff, mimicking yoga poses, and even offering her kisses on command. One especially viral clip showed them twirling together on her balcony at sunset, her voice whispering, "He's not just a piece, my heart." But behind the filters and the floral crowns lay a truth that was harder to glamorize. Toto wasn't adopted through legal wildlife channels. He was purchased as a newborn from an unlicensed private breeder, a transaction steeped in ethical and legal ambiguity. Florida law prohibits private primate ownership without strict permits and inspections, but Mia ignored these barriers. She saw herself as the exception, not the rule. Her inner circle described her devotion as obsessive. She talked to him like a boyfriend, one friend recalled. If you didn't know better, you'd think they were in a relationship. Toto was more than a companion, he was her content, her brand, her emotional center. Her apartment was retrofitted with climbing ropes, toy bins, and child lock snot for a toddler, but for a primate with the strength of 5 men. Mia appeared on pet podcasts, touting her unique bond and urging others to look past the fear and into the eyes of love. But not everyone was enchanted. Wildlife experts warned that chimpanzees, even those raised in captivity, do not lose their instincts, they merely hide them. Mia dismissed those cautions as fear-mongering. "He's never been aggressive. He's gentle," she once posted. But in truth, Toto was already showing signs of behavioral drift, long stares, bursts of agitation, subtle resistance to commands. Her fans saw only the curated highlights, the bedtime cuddles and birthday cupcakes. What they didn't see, what Mia didn't allow them to see, was the creeping unpredictability of a wild animal entering adolescence in a human world. And yet, in that fragile space between spectacle and sincerity, Mia built her legacy. She wasn't just a woman with a chimp, she was the woman who believed love could civilize nature. And as thousands followed her story, none imagined how abruptly and how violent that story would end. By the time Toto turned 6, the cracks in Mia Reyes's carefully cultivated illusion began to show. What was once an adorable costume-wearing chimp had become a 100-pound adolescent primate with muscles dense as steel cable and moods as unpredictable as Florida's summer skies. He no longer responded to Mia's voice with the same eagerness. Instead, he'd freeze mid-motion, eyes locked in distant stares that lasted minutes. At first, it was passed off as just him thinking, but then came the teeth, those sudden, silent displays of canines, unprovoked and chilling. Objects around the condo began to break, ceramic mugs shattered, furniture was overturned, and a glass sliding door cracked from what Mia later called a rough hug. Neighbors on the floor below filed noise complaints, describing sounds like a brawl in a zoo, thudding against walls, screeching, erratic movement above their heads. One reported hearing something crash, followed by Mia's voice pleading in hushed tones. But the building management, familiar with Mia's influencer status and convinced by her reassurances, took no formal action. The moment that should have served as a warning bell came when a delivery man brought a package to her door. According to the man's incident report, the chimp lunged, bit his arm, and had to be kicked away. Mia later downplayed the attack online, laughing it off. "He's just protective of me. It was a nibble, not a bite." But the wound required 3 stitches. Concerned, a close friend of Mia's consulted a wildlife biologist who warned that male chimpanzees entering puberty experience a hormonal surge that often leads to violent, dominant behavior. When the information was relayed to Mia, her response was swift and dismissive. "He's never hurt me." That single sentence would become a haunting refrain. Slowly, her social media activity began to wane. Toto, once the star of her daily updates, was now rarely seen. The few clips that did surface showed him behind the bars of a custom enclosure in her living room, his eyes following the camera warily, his body tense. The fans noticed. "Where's our sweet Toto?" one commenter asked, but Mia offered no answers. Behind closed doors, her life was becoming a quiet storm of fear and denial. Friends stopped visiting, Mia stopped hosting. Isolation thickened like smoke. Some say she was embarrassed, others believe she was scared. But the world she had built around Toto, built on the idea that love could rewrite biology, was unraveling. The signs weren't subtle. They were loud, violent, and unrelenting. But when affection clouds judgment, even danger can be recast as devotion. And in Mia's mind, to admit fear would be to admit failure, not just as a caregiver, but as a believer in the fantasy she'd made millions believe. It was 4:37 p.m. on a blistering August afternoon when the cameras fixed to the Fort Lauderdale high-rise captured their final recording of Mia Reyes alive. The balcony, a familiar stage in so many of her videos, framed her in a quiet domestic moment, brushing Toto's fur as he sat beside her on a woven outdoor couch. But what the footage also showed, though without sound, was tension. Toto's posture was rigid, his movements erratic. He paced the narrow space, hands slapping the concrete, eyes darting to the street below, then back to Mia. According to statements later taken from residents on the 4th and 6th floors, muffled shouting could be heard moments before the first scream. One neighbor described hearing Mia's voice in a high, panicked register, followed by the distinctive screech of an enraged primate. As one witness recounted from their balcony across the street, Toto lunged at her mid-conversation, grabbing at her shirt, then backing away, only to lunge again with increasing intensity. Mia tried to de-escalate, holding out her hand, whispering, crouching low as if to cradle him, but then she stood up abruptly, perhaps to retreat inside. That's when it happened. In a sudden, violent burst, Toto sprang forward, his powerful arms extending toward her back or shoulders. Accounts vary on the exact grip, but the momentum was undeniable. The railing, just under 4 feet tall, offered no resistance against the collision. Mia tumbled over it, her body twisted in midair. The fall of her 50 feet ended with a sickening impact on the pavement below. Paramedics arrived within 4 minutes of the first 911 call. Mia Reyes was pronounced dead at the scene. Forensic examination revealed no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle, no claw marks or contusions, suggesting she hadn't tried to resist him. Some speculated she didn't believe, even in that final second, that he would actually harm her. Onlookers described the scene as surreal. One resident vomited upon seeing Mia's broken form below. Another, a young mother holding her toddler, had to be hospitalized for acute stress response, and up on the 5th floor, Toto remained. Witnesses say he stood near the edge, watching the chaos unfold with what one responder called an unnerving stillness. He did not try to escape, he did not screech, he simply watched. Animal control arrived soon after and tranquilized him without incident. There had been no plan in place, no emergency protocol for a chimpanzee in a residential building. The security staff trained for fire drills and minor medical emergencies could do nothing but wait. The elevator logs showed no movement from Mia's apartment for over an hour before the event, confirming that the chimp had not been caged that afternoon. It was meant to be a quiet moment, another normal day. But in seconds, it turned into a grotesque tableau, captured on silent cameras and seared into the memory of everyone who bore witness. What happened to Mia Reyes was tragic, but it was not unexplainable, nor was it unique. Beneath the surface of her online fairy tale lived a reality that experts in primate behavior have warned about for decades. Chimpanzees may share 98.7% of our DNA, but the small genetic gap masks a vast neurological divide. While they can mimic our gestures, respond to names, and even express apparent affection, their brains are wired for an entirely different social world, one driven by dominance, instinct, and rapid shifts in aggression. At the center of this tragedy is a term known well among primatologists: displacement aggression. Unlike premeditated attacks, these are explosive outbursts with no apparent trigger. A loud sound, a change in scent, a flash of motion, any of these can provoke sudden, brutal behavior, even in chimps who have never shown prior violence. Captivity exacerbates this. In the wild, chimps roam miles of dense forest, forage, hunt, and navigate complex social hierarchies. In a luxury condo, stripped of stimulation, space, and kin, their instincts twist inward. Sensory deprivation combines with human-imposed routines. Clothing, birthdays, social media stunts create a dangerous distortion. Toto wasn't raised to be a chimpanzee, he was raised to be a child. But he was not a child. They don't snap, explains Dr. Lena Cartwright, a leading primate neurobiologist at the University of California. They build. The aggression accumulates in silence until it finds release. For male chimps, that moment often arrives during adolescence. Between the ages of 5 and 8, testosterone spikes drastically. Behavior becomes erratic, unpredictable, and in many cases, dangerous. Mia's belief that her love would insulate her from this biological inevitability was as heartbreaking as it was fatal. And hers was not the first case to end this way. In 2009, Travis the chimpanzee, a household name in Connecticut, mauled a family friend after years of being treated like a son. The victim lost her face. That incident led to federal discussions about banning primates as pets altogether. But over a decade later, the internet's hunger for novelty and shock continues to blur the line between fascination and recklessness. Viral culture rewards what's outrageous: a chimp in a tutu, a chimp giving kisses, a chimp blowing out birthday candles. Millions watch, like, and share, unaware that every view reinforces a dangerous delusion, that control is possible, that instinct can be overwritten with affection. But Toto was not confused. He was never a surrogate child. He was a wild animal asked to live inside a fantasy that denied his biology. In the end, it was not malice that pushed Mia off that balcony. It was momentum, instinct, and the inevitable unraveling of a false bond constructed for clicks. What went wrong wasn't just in that final moment. It was built over years, and the platforms that elevated her story did nothing to stop it. The fallout from Mia Reyes' death rippled far beyond the walls of her luxury condo. Within hours of the incident, officers from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission arrived to secure the scene. Toto, tranquilized and transported in a reinforced containment unit, was taken to a secure holding facility. There, under the assessment of veterinary behaviorists and state officials, the verdict was swift. Toto was deemed a persistent and immediate threat to human safety. Within 72 hours, he was euthanized. The announcement ignited a firestorm online. Mia's fanbase, once united in admiration, fractured into bitter camps. Some mourned her as a misunderstood animal lover who died tragically in the arms of her child. Others, more vocal, saw her as the architect of her own demise, an influencer who gambled with biology for fame and lost. Hashtags like Justice for Toto and Ban Exotic Pets trended side by side. Animal rights activists seized the moment. Protests flared outside the Fort Lauderdale Government Center with placards reading "No more wild pets," and "He wasn't a monster, he was a prisoner." Editorials in major newspapers questioned how Mia had circumvented Florida's exotic pet regulations in the first place. The state's own records revealed she'd never held the required Class I wildlife license. Her condo association, under mounting pressure from residents, filed a civil lawsuit against her estate for policy violations and creating a hazardous environment. In interviews, board members admitted they had long suspected the presence of an exotic animal, but were afraid of backlash given Mia's public profile. A memorial was held 1 week later in a modest downtown chapel. Floral arrangements flanked a collage of Mia's most beloved Imagesher and Toto on the beach, Mia holding him as a baby, Toto dressed as Santa. But notably, no animals were present. The zoo that had once partnered with Mia for promotional events declined to attend. Her family issued a single public statement: "Mia died doing what she loved. We ask for privacy during this time." They refused all follow-up interviews after the announcement of Toto's euthanasia. Online, fan communities that once worshipped Mia transformed into forums of forensic scrutiny. Reddit threads dissected her videos for signs of instability. Animal experts were invited onto podcasts to comment. The narrative shifted from admiration to autopsy. As the weeks passed, the story outgrew Mia herself. Lawmakers in Florida proposed new legislation that would ban private primate ownership altogether, citing her death as a grim catalyst. At the federal level, dormant bills like the Captive Primate Safety Act were suddenly revived. News outlets ran special reports under titles like "Wild at Home: The Dangers of Domesticating the Undomesticable." And in classrooms and ethics seminars across the country, Mia Reyes became a case study. Her tragedy, so preventable, so documented, raised a haunting question that lingered long after the headlines faded. How many more warnings must be ignored before we finally draw the line? The tragedy of Mia Reyes was not a singular event, it was a final echo in a pattern that's played out too many times before. Behind the viral clips and curated smiles lies a deeper psychology, one rooted in human vulnerability more than animal aggression. Mia wasn't just an exotic pet owner, she was a woman chasing intimacy in a world that often feels cold and transactional. For many who turn to wild animals for companionship, the motivation is rarely spectacle alone. It's loneliness, it's grief, it's a hunger for connection so strong that they blur the line between human and beast, not out of ignorance but out of need. In psychology, this is known as anthropomorphism, attributing human traits to non-human entities. We dress them, name them, cradle them, speak to them as if they understand not just our words, but our intentions. For a time, the illusion holds. The chimp hugs back, the tiger purrs. The wolf lays at our feet, but affection is not understanding, and mimicry is not consent. Mia believed, with every fiber of her being, that love could bridge evolution, that her bond with Toto was singular, sacred, safe. She is not alone in this belief. The archives of animal attack cases are filled with names, almost always solitary individuals who rejected warnings and convinced themselves that their animal was different. But difference doesn't undo biology. You can't raise instinct out of a predator, Dr. Lena Cartwright stated bluntly in the wake of the investigation. You can't hug away 6 million years of evolution. And yet, the voice of reason is so often drowned out by the sound of clicks and cheers. Mia had been warned. By friends, by neighbors, by experts, even by her own animal's behavior. But the fantasy she built was too precious to shatter. She doubled down, isolated further, tuned out the noise and amplified her own conviction. That balconized site of so many viral moments became, in the end, a perfect metaphor. It was the boundary she refused to see, the place where devotion met denial, where control met chaos, and where a woman's need to believe in the impossible met the unrelenting weight of nature. In one of her last recorded clips, Mia is seen hugging Toto on that very balcony, her cheek pressed against his fur, whispering, "You'll never leave me." The camera pans outward, capturing the sunset and the skyline, the quiet before a storm no one would see coming. She smiles. Toto does not. That footage, once celebrated as proof of their bond, now plays like a slow-motion tragédia love letter sealed with oblivion. It's not just a cautionary tale about a woman and her chimp. It's a reckoning for every one of us who mistakes desire for destiny and affection for safety. The final warning isn't about Toto, it's about us. This was never just a story about a woman and her chimpanzee. It was never about villainy or monster snot, about bad owners or killer animals. It is, and always has been, about the boundary, the unrelenting, unforgiving line that separates human fantasy from biological reality. That line isn't drawn in blood or bone, but in instinct. And once it is crossed, no amount of love, loyalty, or belief can redraw it. Mia Reyes didn't set out to tempt fate. She set out to nurture, to love, to belong. But what makes us feel special doesn't make us safe. In her world, Toto was not a chimpanzee. He was a companion, a child, a soulmate. And when he obeyed, when he cuddled close, when he mimicked her laughter or blew kisses to her camera, she believed that meant something deeper, that it was proof of transformation, of understanding. But mimicry is not love. It is learned behavior. It is rehearsal, not revelation. And obedience is not tameing, it is timing, temporary and often misunderstood. Dr. Lena Cartwright put it plainly. There is no safe version of a chimpanzee in a living room, full stop. No enclosure, no affection, no social media following can undo the neural wiring of a wild animal. For every video that melted hearts, there were warning signs, dismissed, downplayed, or never seen. And so, the inevitable happened. A moment of tension, a surge of instinct, a lunge, a fall, a scream. Replay the 911 call in your mind, the raw panic, the disbelief, the horror of realizing that the illusion had finally shattered. The voice crying out, "She fell, there's a chimpanzee on the balcony." In that moment, everything Mia had built collapsed into silence. She thought she was raising a child. But in the end, nature raised its voice and it did not whisper. Toto wasn't evil. He wasn't calculating. He was a chimpanzee doing what chimpanzees do when confusion, stress, and instinct collide. Mia wasn't reckless. She wasn't cruel. She was a woman who believed too deeply in her own exception. But love does not conquer instinct. It cannot rewrite evolution. And for Mia Reyes, the cost of that misunderstanding was fatal. Let this not be just a memorial, but a message. To every viewer, to every dreamer, to every would-be exotic pet owner, the boundary is real, and it does not bend for love.